Okay, so like he said, this is a workshop for Dream Big. I know he mentioned women. However, if there are men in here, this applies to you too. This is not a women's workshop, but God's got me doing some crazy work with women. So, okay, this is where I get to learn the technology. So let's hope things work well. Next slide. Oh, did it. Okay. All right, how many of you in here, raise your hand if you have big dreams? Awesome. Okay, how many of you sometimes feel a little awkward if you had to share them publicly? Raise your hand. Okay, and then how many of you sometimes wonder if you're being selfish by having such big dreams? Okay, cool. Talking to the right crowd. This is great. So my goal for you by the end of this workshop is to help you feel peace about pursuing the desires that God placed in your heart. That is my big goal. Here's how this is going to go. So we've got the little flow to this workshop here. So I'm going to do a little intro of myself, and then we're going to talk about branches, we're going to talk about pizza, we're going to talk about duty, and then we're going to go into some caveats, some warnings, and then we'll go into some light bulbs. And if you don't know what light bulbs are, I'll tell you at the end. Alrighty, a little bit about me. So I do acting because God told me to do it. And when he said for me to do it, I went and I did the work. I became, I just was obedient since then, getting training and all of that. I've won awards, and I'm a season regular, or a series regular on Vindication, which is just crazy to me. I also run a community for Christian actresses called the Powerhouse Sisterhood Suite. That's the work that I said that God's got me doing, just wild. And then recently moved into producing when God connected me with two of those ladies from my actress community. We produced our first film. We just placed in the top 3 at ICVM, which was held at NRB. And then we are nominated here. Sharon is one of my producing partners. What are we nominated for here? Best short film, we're nominated here. And then we're talking about our next project, which is a huge undertaking and something God's gonna definitely have to do. If you want to know more about any of the things that I do, you can go to that website. I didn't even see if it was displaying for you guys, so I'm glad it is. But yeah, at the bottom, you can go to that website if you want to learn more about any of these things. All right, why are we gonna talk about this? Why are we talking about dreaming big? Because I myself have wrestled with it, and then God showed me things in his word, and it freed me to be like, okay, permission to dream big. So I wanted to share that with more than just myself. So we're going to talk about branches in the water. That would be wild if any of you knew what that meant, but I know that you don't. So in December, in that online Christian community that I have for the actresses, in December we did a meeting on Dream Board Bash. And we were talking about having vision boards and everyday reminders as to what it is that we want to accomplish, what's on our hearts. And as I was preparing for that, I had a lot of realizations. I intended to talk only about one verse, but then as I started reading the word, it was like God kept giving me more verses. And I was like, wow, okay. So I had more proof about what's in front of our eyes is important, and what we put in front of our eyes matters. So since it was freeing for me to learn that, I shared it with the ladies, and then I also wanted to share it with more. So when I was asked to do a workshop here, this is what I felt on my heart to share. Next slide. Okay. Oh, that was what we just did. Okay. Story of Jacob and Laban. Some people say Laban. I'm going to say Laban probably. I might bounce back and forth. But I'm going to paraphrase a little bit of their relationship, and then I'm going to get into the meat of why we're talking about this verse with dreaming big. So Jacob met Laban, started working for him. Then Laban asked Jacob what payment he wanted in return. Jacob said that he wanted Rachel, which was Laban's second daughter. So Laban said, okay, work for me for 7 years. You can marry her. So Jacob did that. And then Laban lied, and he gave Jacob his first daughter, Leah. It's like, okay. And then Jacob said, well, I wanted Rachel. Laban said, okay, well, you can have her after the bridal week, but you're going to need to work another 7 years. He was like, okay. So he did that. Eventually, Jacob wanted to return to his homeland. And Laban said, well, how much do I owe you? Because Jacob had made him very wealthy. So Laban was like, how much do I owe you for all that you've done? And Jacob said, don't give me anything. Just let me take the speckled, the spotted, and the brown sheep, the lambs, and the goats. Those are going to be my wages. Basically, all of the flawed ones. So Laban agreed, but then I don't know if you guys know this or ever saw this. Laban is like, okay, all those flawed ones that you want, he actually got his sons to take all of the flawed ones out of the flock and take them a 3 days journey away from Jacob. So Jacob pretty much had no wages. And it doesn't really say how Jacob felt about this, but in Genesis 31:7, it does say that Laban had changed Jacob's wages 10 times, so I'm sure he wasn't surprised. So now we're going to get into the meat of why we're on this. Okay, so this is Genesis 30:37. And I'm going to read the verses, and then we're going to come back through and we're going to break them down. So 37, it says, Then Jacob took some fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and he peeled off strips of bark, making the white streaks on them, which this is not an identical representation, but it was the closest I could get. So 38, this is an important verse. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. The New King James Version says, And the rods which he peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. 39. And when they mated in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked and speckled and spotted. Then Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flocks, and at mating time, he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black, and this is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them, and then they would mate in front of the branches. And 42 says, But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats, females and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. Okay, we're going to break it down. So in 37, he got the bark, he created a visual, and then in 38 it says he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where they came to mate. It says so that they should conceive when they came to drink. Conceive it can be both ways. So it can be to form an idea or a plan in the mind, so imagine or think, and then it can also be to become pregnant. So in this context, I believe it was meant both ways, to conceive visually and then also to physically recreate. And then in 39, it says, when they mated in front of the branches, they gave birth to young that looked like that. So this is what they were seeing when they mated, and the physical result that came from it is what their eyes were beholding when they mated. Then in 40, it says that he separated them, and then he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. This is how he built his own flock. So again, he put something in front of them. He made his flock turn towards the ones that were streaked or black, and that's how they increased. I don't know if you guys know that podcast, How I Built This, but if Jacob was being interviewed, this would be his How I Built This, is by creating that visual representation for the result that he wanted. So just showing that what they beheld in the mental is what they received in the physical. So how does this work? This is going to get, I think I just jumped ahead. Okay, how does this work? It's going to get a little bit brainy, but not very long. But this is super fascinating. So God, we all know, is incredible. Like, there are things about the body that we have not even studied, cannot comprehend. But there is a piece of our brain that's called the reticular activating system, so the RAS. And it has a lot of functions, but one of those is that it acts as a filter for us. Have any of you guys been around a seeing eye dog before? Not a single person? 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. Okay, a couple of you. Awesome. All right, so I actually worked for an IT company that helped blind people, and one of the things that I got to do, which is really neat, was see for them, and they would hold a camera that showed me everything in front of them, and then I would help them if they were in New Zealand or Australia, if they were going to the mall or they were going to the beach or they were trying to get on the public transportation. I was able to see what they were seeing and help them navigate. But one of the really neat things of being a part of that company was seeing the guide dogs and how good they were at their job, and they did not allow distractions to come through. And that is similar to our RAS, our reticular activating system. It does selective filtering like those guide dogs, and it filters the information based on personal significance. So how do we train our How do we train our activating system? It prevents our brain from being overwhelmed by sensory input by deciding what's important to us and then what we need to ignore. It's like filtering out the background noise. Like, when you're out in the lobby and there's a lot of stuff happening, but as soon as you hear your name, it perks up. That's what the RAS does. So it points out what is important to you, and it just filters and calms down everything else around it. So the way that we can influence it, because it's a highly adaptive system and it can be trained from focusing away from the threats and then focusing on opportunities and the positive information that we feed it. So what we're putting in front of it. So ways that we can influence it. We can provide clarity by actively focusing on specific goals or specific interests, but you have to know what you want in order to train it. So I remember specifically, don't know where I was going, but I was on the road and there was another car trying to get somewhere, and I was like, dude, I will help you get to where you're going, but your blinker's not on. And if you don't know where you're going and you can't tell me where you're going, I can't help you. But once you put on your blinker, I can be like, okay, I'll let you squeeze in here, or I'll actually hold these people off so you can fit in. But you have to know where you're going. It's the same with the brain. We have to provide clarity to the brain so that it knows what's important to us. The other way that we can influence it is repetition. So we can consistently focus on a topic or a task which signals its importance to the brain. So like declarations or affirmations, I know a lot of time that's really woo-woo stuff, but I see it as like your mom always telling you, honey, you're so talented, you're gonna own a business one day. And the next day, honey, you're so talented, you're gonna own a business one day. And again, honey, you're so talented, you're gonna own a business one day. Over and over, that repetition, she's speaking this into your life. She's speaking over you. So that repetition, our reticular activating system, holds on to the repetitive thing, understanding that that's important to us. And the other way that we can influence our RAS is visualization. So using visualization techniques to reinforce what you want it to prioritize. And then this is basically what Jacob did, the story that we just learned about the branches. He used a visual representation or a technique to reinforce what needed to be prioritized. Vision boards are similar. You're putting a vision in front of your eyes for your RAS to behold. And then it starts going to work for you by filtering out everything that is seemingly unimportant because it's not on that vision board. Now, a little side thing. So we're telling it what's important to us. What are you telling yours? How are you activating yours? And if it helps us achieve what's in front of our eyes, then how important is it for us to not put trash in front of our eyes? That's not what this is about, but it's something to consider because what's in front of our eyes really does matter. Alrighty, part 2 is pizza toppings. But what in tarnation? What does pizza have to do with big dreams? I'm going to tell you. But first I'm going to tell you about this workshop opportunity that came up for me, and then the thoughts that came with it. So there's this workshop that I had been wanting to do for at least a year. It's a business workshop. It never worked out. Full-time job. This workshop was always Monday through Friday, but I was like, I know that this is a workshop that lines up with the way that I want to do business, but it was never an opportune time because I'm not just going to take off work to do a workshop. So there was a strange period of life last year where I was away from home for 4 months and I was doing. But then there came a period where I could not do. I had to wait for the others to do, and I had nothing to do but twiddle my thumbs. And this workshop came back around, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I feel like I should do this one. It's perfect. Like the timing is perfect. The times of the day were perfect. Everything just worked out. I literally had nothing else I could do. And I was going back and forth on it because of this mental tug-of-war that I have, and maybe some of you guys can relate or maybe have related before. So I had these whispers of doubt, but then my own rebuttals to it. And if you guys relate, I would love to know. So these whispers of doubt that would go through my mind is, golly, I shouldn't think so much about business. I shouldn't think so much about my dream and this business idea that I have and this passion. Why should I try to earn more money? Like I should be doing home Bible studies or I should be doing street ministry because that's where the real impact is. But it's not right for me to want more for my life. And I need to stop pursuing what's on my mind and just let God do whatever he wants. But how can I turn off my brain? How can I stop being so driven? How do I stop going after these? I need to just stop going after them and stop chasing the world. Those are all the thoughts. Have you guys ever had any of those before? Okay, awesome. My people, I get it. So the rebuttals, though, that would also come up when I'm having these conflicting thoughts, the rebuttals were, but God gave me this business brain, but he gave me this creativity. And why should evil people be the only ones with wealth? Why can't good people have wealth and bless other people with it? This workshop is so perfectly timed. I'm actually available. I have nothing to do. And he's already spoken big things over me. Like, God's already spoken big stuff. He gave me the name for my company. And why do I have such big dreams and goals if I'm not supposed to go after them? So these were all the things relaying through. And what did I do? All of these thoughts going through my head. Well, my solution is to do what I always do when I'm like, am I chasing the world? What are my intentions here? God, I want to honor you. I want you to show me what to do in this instance. So I was like, all right, God, I'm going to do a 2-day fast for this workshop. Like, I think it's perfectly timed. I think it's from you. Will you show me that it's from you so I'm not chasing the world? I did a 2-day fast, and God answered on day 1, and he answered twice. And I'm going to share that with you guys. So the first one is, make sure this is a slide. Okay. The first one is I went to my Bible, and I thought, you know what? The story that comes to mind is the parable of the talents. I'm going to go read that. I'm just going to see if anything pops out at me. I'm sure you guys have all read it, but I'm going to read it. I'm kind of going to skim a little bit, but this is Matthew 25:14 through 30. So in 14 it says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods or talents or money to them. In 15, dividing it in proportion to their abilities, and then he left on his trip. So then he comes back in 21. Servant 5 had 5 talents, and he ended up getting 5 more talents. And the master said, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I'll make thee ruler over many.'" Have you guys all heard this? Yeah, okay. Then 22, the servant with 2 talents. He made 2 more talents. And the master again said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I'll make thee ruler over many." Then servant 1 came back with 0 talents. And the master, and he said, "I was afraid. I hid what you gave me." And this is when the master gets crunk. It's like, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew that I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." Then he ordered, "Take the money from this servant and give it to the ones with the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they're given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless, and another version says unprofitable, servant into outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And when I read that last one, I thought, oh my goodness, Lord, you just slapped me in the face with that. It was just like he spoke to my soul of, it is okay. Like, I want you to be profitable with the resources that I've given you. And he takes so seriously the gifts that he gave us. He entrusted them to us, and it's our duty to turn them into something for him. So that was the first answer to my fast. The second answer, we get to talk about pizza toppings. So the neighbor comes over, and after I read the parables of the talent, I went out to my car. My mom likes to sit in the car. She loves the sunshine, but she loves the comfort. So she was sitting in the car, and I went to go tell her about what I just read and just how God spoke to me. And as we're talking about that, the neighbor comes up. There's this guy. He starts reversing down the long driveway where I'm at this woman's house. And we're like, who's this? Who's this guy? Don't know. He gets out, finally we figure out he's the neighbor. He's supposed to come over and trim the bushes for the host where we're staying. We start talking about all kinds of things. And then he starts telling us stories because he actually pastors a youth group, and he wanted to tell us some stories. One of those, he said, "Can I tell you all the story about the pizza?" And we're like, sure. So he said, "What's your favorite topping?" And he asked us. And I said, "Pepperoni." And then she said, "Onions." And she said, "Mushrooms." And he said, "Well, my mom used to tell me that people are like pizza. The crust is like the earth. The sauce is everybody filling up the earth. And then the toppings are that each one of us were given unique gifts that God wants to use to make the world a better place." And then he left. And I was like, wow, you didn't even trim any bushes. So I knew that God was answering my fast. And it was just a humbling. Anytime God answers me, especially through a fast, I'm like, man, Lord, you didn't have to do that. But he did it so clearly, and I felt peace about doing this workshop, so I did the workshop. So now we're going to jump into part 3, which is duty. Now, we all have the same mission, which is to bring people to Jesus. But we all have individual assignments, and we all have different resources. So we're going to talk about the individual assignments there and how to figure out what your assignment is. And the difference, so what we can do, there's 3 of them. So you can ask, you can do, or he can assign. And we're going to break those down. So number 1, you can ask. We've all heard the verse, you have not because you ask not. In James 4, 1 through 4, it says, what's causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and you kill to get it. You're jealous of what other people have, but you can't get it. So you fight and you wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you do ask, you don't get it because your motives are wrong. You want only what's going to give you pleasure. So we need to ask ourselves the things that we want when we ask God for them. Are we asking for things that are going to glorify us or things that are going to glorify the kingdom? So checking our intentions when we do ask. The second part is you can do. So that goes back to the parable of the talents. The workers, they weren't really told what to do. If they were, it's not in the Bible, but they were just given talents. They were given resources. And then they ended up multiplying, and it kind of goes back to what Andy was saying earlier at the top of his talk about, hey, somebody at the Bible school said, what do you have in your hands? And he was like, a camera. And he just went forth. And just to sit on that for a minute, I remember being in a workshop specifically, and I was pursuing this one thing that was just working well. And this guy was like, he was talking about running and how he ended up just running a mile, and it turned into more. And then all of a sudden, he was competing in an Ironman. And he was like, but I wouldn't have ever competed in the Ironman if I didn't just stay in the process of running the mile. And I needed to hear that day, and maybe some of you do. It wasn't anything that I really felt super deeply passionate about, but it was the journey that God had me on. But because I stayed on that journey, God was able to take me down another path, and then another path, and then another path. But had I quit and just been like, this isn't really feeding my soul, then I wouldn't have been able, those other open doors wouldn't have gotten to come. So sometimes it's just staying in the process and then letting God take you to the next thing, because sometimes there's that refining that needs to happen, or the learning. And in my case, little side note here is being at this full-time job that I had, and every day I'm praying, I'm like, Lord, can you just tell me what I need to learn for my business so I can get out of here? Everything, just let me soak it all in, because I don't want to be here anymore. It happened. So good. He got me out. But so then part 3 is he can assign. And I know I was talking to, don't let me jump ahead. Okay, so going back to my acting thing, I said at the top that I hated acting. I put a star on this, on that first bullet point. I don't remember why that's there. Just go with it. It's made to look pretty. So I hated acting. I tried it in high school. I just saw an ad in the back of the paper. I actually saw an ad for modeling and acting, and I went for modeling, and they were like, oh, you're too short, but maybe you should try acting. And I was like, oh, well, that's a very nice way to say I shouldn't do modeling, but I will try acting. So I tried acting. I ended up signing with this company for a year. I went to LA for 2 weeks, did a whole bunch of workshops. They were terrible. I had to lay on the ground, pretend I was a squirrel, just be an animal, all these weird things. And I was like, no, never, ever doing acting. Do any of you guys, hate Brussels sprouts? Anybody hate Brussels sprouts? Okay. Any of you hate mushrooms? Okay. Somebody else call out a food that you hate. Onion. Okay. Somebody else give me another food. Okay. Asparagus. Okay. So can you guys imagine just in this moment having a thought of, I want some onions. I want some asparagus. Oh my gosh, Brussels sprouts sound so good. That would be totally foreign to you to think that. And you would know that that's not your thought. That's exactly what God did to me. I was on my college campus, and I was walking to my next class. And I remember looking at the theater building. And I had this immediate download of, I want to do acting. Why am I not getting my degree in theater? But exactly like the onion and asparagus, I was like, that was not my thought, 100% not my thought. My brain over here was saying, no, you don't, you hate acting. But this was like, it felt like it just dropped into my head because it wasn't my own, and I knew God was telling me to do acting. So from that moment, I became obedient. I slowly made my way to Austin, Texas, got an agent, coaches, started doing classes, and I just felt like it was my duty to do it well. This is my assignment. If this is what he told me to do, then I need to be obedient and I need to do it well. Not just like hokey pokey, but he told me this is what I'm going to do, so I need to do it very well. So he put the assignment there. Another one is Noah building the ark. He told Noah what to do. I don't think Noah was asking like, hey, God, should I build an ark? Should I build an ark? No. God was like, hey, you're going to build an ark. And how long did it take? And it says like they don't really know for sure, but they estimate that it took between 55 and 75 years. So sometimes the assignment we have is going to take us some time, and we just need to be okay with understanding that that's part of the game. When we have that assignment, I don't know if any of you guys, raise your hand if God has given you a word for your future and like your assignment. That is amazing. I want to encourage you guys who don't have that to pray for that, because what happens when God gives that to you, not yourself, when he gives that to you, the troubled waters that you go through, the difficulties, man, they become so much easier to manage because you're like, all right, Lord, I know you're in charge of all of this. We're going to keep going, and I have peace about whatever chaos happens. It's okay because I know the big picture is something that you're going to bring to life. Not anything, I'm going to work towards it, but I'm not carrying the weight of it. So if you haven't had God speak that over you, I just want to really deeply encourage you to ask him to give you that. And just last week, so in that online community of Christian actresses, I bring in guest speakers. And one of those was the CEO and co-founder of Faith Channel, Jon Stewart. He was talking about how years ago God gave him a very specific word. And then he went through these crazy trials, but he held on to that word, and now they are where they are. So that word from God is just so peace-giving. Alrighty, we're going to jump into the caveats about these big dreams. So caveat number 1 is committing, and I kind of lightly mentioned this, but committing to growing the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of self. In Proverbs 16:3, it says, commit thy works unto the Lord, not unto thyself, and thy plan shall be established. So committing thy works unto the Lord, that means to carry into action deliberately. And then our deliberate, is it for selfish gain, or is it for godly gain? And then to establish means growing or flourishing successfully. So deliberately carry your works into action, and thy thoughts or plans shall grow or flourish successfully. But we first have to commit them to him, not to us. And then caveat number 2, it's not all for keeps. Malachi 3:10, we're talking about tithing here. So Malachi 3:10 says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I'll pour out a blessing so great that you won't have room enough to take it in. Try me. Put me to the test. He's very clear that we need to tithe. And as he increases our territory, we are to give back to him. Proverbs 3:9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he'll fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. So just remembering, as he does open these doors for you, as he takes you forward in your assignment, remembering that it's not for self, and remembering that as maybe your bank account grows or your network grows or whatever it is that grows, give it back to God. Then we're going to jump into warnings. Warning number 1. So Matthew 25:29, we read it earlier, but it says, to those who use well what they were given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Consider the useless servant. Will be considered the useless servant if the resources that he embedded in us, we do nothing with them. And it doesn't matter the reason. So whether it's fear, or we're afraid of being judged, or we don't want to fail, or it's going to take too long, like the 55 to 75 years of building an ark. It doesn't matter what the reason is, but from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. So realizing the resources that God's given you and then doing something with them. And then staying in that process, like I said earlier, doing something even if you don't love it, but let God use that to open more doors and more doors. Warning number 2. This is from Exodus 27. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. In vain means without real significance, value, or importance, so baseless or worthless. Doing something with no result or to no effect. So taking God's name and it being empty, or like taking the last name of your husband and having it mean nothing. Okay, so you're a Smith now, but what does that mean? It stands for nothing. It's empty. But as children of God, if we're going to be his children and we're going to take his name, then there better be some fruit for it in our relationships, in our application of the talents he's given us, or in our lives. But there's got to be some fruit if we're going to take his name. So, if you needed permission to go and do big things, you now have it. That's it. We're going to do some light bulbs now. Who had something from that stuck out to you that you'd like to share? And I don't know if we have an extra microphone here, but we may bring the microphone to you. But I like to do this because I think sometimes when somebody else says, hey, this popped out for me, or this stuck out for me, or I'd never thought about it before, somebody else goes, oh, that's right, I forgot about that part. I'm so glad it was reiterated in this moment. So I don't know that we want to do questions. Does anybody want to do questions, or would you rather do light bulbs? Okay, we're going to do light bulbs. You have an extra mic? Okay, what stuck out for you guys? What's something that stuck out in dreaming big? I imagine we're all on the same page. Yes, back there, Tara.
Hey, I love your story because it's so similar to mine. And over the past few years, God gave me a verse too, 1 Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And that's like the pizza topping thing, that revelation you had. And that verse just really touched me, because as I was studying the talents and that parable, I was learning that wealth in the Bible times was like measured by livestock and women and land and talents. And the reason that the bride price was so high was because that family was losing a member of their society, one that used their talents or their gifts, and the things that they were using them for were like cultivating the land or caring for something that's already been cultivated, or they were creating something new. And I just think that is so cool that God gave us gifts within those 3 C's, I guess, you know. But what you were talking about just really like affirmed God's message to me too, and I just really appreciate that. So, love you, sister.
Yes, you're welcome. Anybody else have anything that stuck out back there in the black jacket?
Basically, troubled waters don't deter me because God's got it. He's carrying me because he gave me the gift, he gave me the talent, and he gave me the call and the purpose. And no matter how long it takes, as long as I remain obedient, I won't have to sacrifice. As long as I remain obedient to his word and his call and his purpose, and do what he has instructed me to do. Step by step, trusting him. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, ordered. The steps are ordered. So yes, I'm not deterred by the storms.
I love that. And I will say one of the things that has helped me as I build a business and everything is this quote. I know you've all heard it. Little by little, a little becomes a lot. So when there were days where I was like, I'm not doing much, or I feel really tired, but I'm trying to make this thing happen. And God, you gave me a vision. Even though I was doing little things, I just told myself, little by little, a little becomes a lot. And when I look back, I'm like, man, God, it's crazy what you have built with just a little steps of obedience like that. Anybody else have light bulbs you want to share? Yes, up here in the front. Jared's getting his cardio. Thank you, Jared.
I like what you said about putting that vision in front of you. People talk about putting a vision board, and I don't have the patience to put pictures on a piece of paper, but I realized me writing out a sketch of my intentions is my vision board. Me answering the phone for spam callers with my with my business name now. It's, well, one, they hang up on you because they're not allowed to call a business. But two, it's me calling that into existence every time a spam caller calls, and it's, many times a day. So it's my vision. I loved what you said about that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I used to, when I would think of vision boards, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to go find some magazines, flip through all of them, cut some out, tape some stuff. I don't have time for crafts. Some people do. I'm not going to make the time. But what I did for my vision board is I actually just pulled up a Google Doc, and then I Googled whatever pictures I wanted to put on there, found the best one, copied it onto my document, made them a nice square. Actually, my background was my vision board. I literally changed it like an hour before this workshop because I didn't want it to be distracting. But that was so fast. It was like 15 minutes of Googling some stuff, putting it on a document, and then printing it, and also putting it as my computer desktop. So you can do that if you're wanting to do a vision board. The second thing I would say on that is I used to put a bunch of quotes on my vision board, which are great and they're lovely, but our brain receives things in images, not words. So if that's what you're aiming for, I would encourage you to do pictures, not words and quotes. Not that you can't, but anybody else have, yes, right here in the black shirt. Back further. Yeah. And then we'll come forward.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome, Venus. I love the parable of the talents. As an entrepreneur myself, that's the main scripture the Lord has had me in. So I just want to share something else from that scripture that God was teaching me. And it was that he gave to each of the 3 servants according to their ability. And I found that sometimes I would get in my own way by my lack of knowledge or what I didn't know, or feel intimidated by all of the question marks. And God very kindly said, just ask me, and I can increase your ability, and then I can increase how much more you produce and all of the things. So I just wanted to encourage people to, he's also a giver of things like that too.
Yes, I love that. I'm so glad you said that. And then up here, right? Yes.
I loved it all too. Thank you so much for all of that. Really want to look into the RAS brain training and all of that more. But my nugget, I guess, that I'm taking away is when you talked about your 2-day fast. I think that's something that I struggle with and relate to a lot too. Is it seems like everything is lining up, and of course this must be the Lord because it's all falling in line. But we know that the enemy a lot of times can do that too. But it looked so perfect. So I just thought it was so great how you could have easily said, all of these things are lined up. God is wanting me to do this, but you still wanted to use extra discernment. And I love that you just said, let's just be sure I'm going to go into a 2-day fast with the Lord. And then he just honored that right out of the gate like he always does. So not that we expect answers immediately, but he's just so good to us. So that is something that I would love to incorporate more. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it goes back to him giving you assignment. So when he does answer, at least for me, when he answers in a fast, man, I have so much more peace about the thing. Because if he hadn't, I already paid for the workshop, but I still fasted because I had to pay for it in a certain amount of time. But I probably would have hung out surface level in the workshop and just kind of skimmed over it, hardly listened. But when I got the okay from God, I was like, all right, Lord, I'm invested then. That I'm going to pay attention to everything. If this is something that you're ushering me forward into, there's such a good peace about it. Anybody else? Yes, back there, Susan, and then we'll come to the front.
Hey, Venus. So I've heard your testimony of how you hated acting and then fell in love with it later, or not fell in love with it, but you know what I mean. But the light bulb was hearing how you explained it with the different foods I like or I don't like. And that was that's what she meant. Okay, you have a desire that you never, ever thought you'd ever had because you'd already dismissed it earlier in life. The other light bulb was praying for a word. I don't have a word. And I feel very selfish at times when I feel, does God want this for me? Because I want that. I feel selfish if I follow through a desire. So I seek guidance on how to separate what I want to do versus what God wants me to do. And a few years ago at this conference, I just felt, well, if it's crazy, it must be from God. And that was my mantra. If it's crazy, because everybody's testimony, it's like, oh, well, that was a crazy idea. Nobody believed me, but God made it happen. So I feel like I need to stick to that and stick to the prayer for the word to understand when it's okay to pursue what you've given us permission to do and what he gives permission to do. So thanks for helping the light bulb get a little brighter.
You're very welcome. And a story that comes to mind for that of whenever it's like, I want to do it, but I'm not sure if God wants me to. I remember when I was first asked to speak at a festival, do a workshop at a festival, and my immediate response, actually, I was asked here at CWVFF by someone who runs another festival. And my immediate thought was like, yes, like I would love to. I've been wanting to do that. But what I said was, yes, but let me pray on it because I don't even know what I would talk about. Like, Lord, if this is from you, then I just pray that you give me the message because my flesh wants to speak, but I don't know that you want me to speak. So I didn't answer that guy for a while. Like, I was praying and I was praying and I was praying. And I was like, Lord, you got to give me the message. And I was reading in the Word, and I was reading this very specific story. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to tell my family. All these things were just popping out to me. I was like, I need to share this with my family. And then I thought, no, I'm going to share this with the ladies in the suite. And then I was like, no, I need to share this with more. And God was like, no, that's your message. Yes, you can do the workshop. That's your message. So sometimes just waiting and like waiting on him. Sometimes we want the answer like so fast, like he answered my 2-day fast on the first day. But sometimes we have to wait for him to affirm it. And then, man, again, going back to the peace that you have when God says it's okay, it just feels so much better. Coming to the front.
I really loved in the duty section, I loved when you said, use what you have to produce something. Just because, like, Jesus was so poor, yet he produced, like the word everywhere. And it's so cool because he literally had nothing. Like, he had, except the Lord. Like, he had nothing but the Lord. And, yeah, it was just, that's really cool because you don't have to have all this fancy stuff to be able to just produce something beautiful. Because if it comes from God, then, like, it's going to be beautiful anyway. So it was, yeah, I really loved how that was my light bulb. I love how you said, like, just use what you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, yeah.
And a lot of times in the entrepreneur space, we'll go over here. In the entrepreneur space, you'll hear clarity comes from action. So as you take steps forward, things unfold. And I'm sure, like Ian's been doing this, his entrepreneur thing, his videos, and as something happens, I'm sure something new unfolds. Every time he puts out a new video, he's got a new idea that then he gets another resource. And so there's clarity in action. And then you had a question over here? I mean, a light bulb over here. We'll bring in the mic.
More of a question also, but last year I did a kingdom finance course that I felt the Lord told me to teach others, and so I've had all these entrepreneurs come in, and one of the things we did do a vision board, and I had them prep the vision board with writing scripture before they put any pictures or cut out anything, so it was just filled with scripture. And then the question I have is, when does like when we are walking on this earth and what we are to do for the Lord, when do we turn around and look to monetize it, see that it's a business, right? Because I do believe that we are workers deserve our compensation. But I haven't had the heart to put myself out in a position to ask people to come to this workshop and pay. And, you know, I have a ministry to fight against child trafficking, and I'm trying to always figure out, how do I fundraise? What do I do?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I feel like maybe Christians ask that more than non-Christians, because I understand the heart, and we're always like, we want to give, and I've been blessed and I want to give, and it's always that wrestle of, but when do I charge, and how much do I charge? And honestly, I am not the expert on when and how to do that, but I will say what I have learned is that by not charging, you're actually doing people a disservice, because when people aren't invested in the thing, they take it very lightly. They're not going to attend. You give it to them for free. They're not appreciative for the thing because they didn't put any skin in the game. So when you do put skin in the game, I mean, think about any big purchases that you guys have made. When you make a big purchase, you're likely going to take care of the home. You're likely going to do whatever you got to do to maintain the home, or any other big purchase. When you put your money into something that you worked hard for, you're more than likely going to show up and do the work. So whenever you do offer something for free, and it's all this knowledge that God has given you, and all these, like, when you think of the time that you've invested into learning accounting that somebody else doesn't even have the time to do, or the numbers, and you think of the courses that you've paid money for, you think of the hours that you've spent watching somebody else and doing the training, when you actually document that out and see the hours, the time, the money that you've invested in something, then there's like this, oh, well, nobody else probably wants to actually put all that I've invested in for 17 years learning this thing. I think it's okay if I charge a little bit here, because they're not having to go back and redo the 17 years. They just have to pay for the 3-hour workshop that I'm now going to teach. So some of that kind of helps me with charging. I mean, I've also had folks be surprised that my online membership isn't free. And I think of it from a perspective of this, I actually want to do it well. And to do it well, it takes a lot of time away from my own life, my husband, my family, all of this. I'm actually purchasing all of the website, the payroll, like everything. And so there's got to be some compensation there for me to not be resentful, to just give you guys this thing. So I totally understand where you're coming from, but I'm not the expert on it. But that would be my 2 cents, yeah. Anybody else have some light bulbs? We actually have about 10 minutes left. Yes, ma'am, in the white shirt.
One thing that really stuck out to me that was also reflected in what you had to say up in front was the way that you said, what do you have in your hands? And it's funny because my pastor spoke on that yesterday. And there's a verse, and I cannot remember where it is, but it's in the Old Testament, I think in Zechariah. And it says, despise not small beginnings. And then right after that, you said, little by little, a little becomes a lot. And that can be hard to remember, but it's probably one of the most important things to remember.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because anybody in here a perfectionist? Okay, it's really hard for us to get started on things until we know that it's going to turn out really well. My mom tells me the story of when I was a kid, 6th grade, started playing the trumpet, went to band practice, came home the first day, and I was crying. And I was crying because I didn't know how to play the trumpet. She was like, honey, this is the first day you ever touched a trumpet. But I'm like, no, I have very high expectations of myself. So that whole like little by little thing, it is a good reminder, especially for us. It's just like, just do a little bit, do that well, and then you can kind of grow on that. But yes, don't despise the small beginnings. Anybody else have light bulbs? Yes, ma'am. Tanya in the front, and then we'll go behind Tanya.
Well, I really loved you talking about being specific, because when opportunities are opening and they're big and they're kind of murky, and as far as there's not real clarity with it, that made me think, okay, how can I be clear on what my contribution can be? And as I focus on that, it doesn't mean I can't pivot if it turns out the situation or the opportunity shifts. But if I'm just in this ambiguous space, I'm not able to really contribute because I'm sitting there waiting for the big answer, the big sign. Go ahead and choose something, move in it, and then if God, brings more clarity, and I, like you, and I really appreciated it, prayer and fasting is where, that's where I get my big callings and my big answers. And so for me, and go with what I think is the clarity. Do you have issues like you think, okay, I got it, I got the clarity, and then you second guess what you thought was your clarity? Or do you know that you know that you know?
Oh, I'm sure I second guess a lot, but I just move forward anyway.
Okay, yeah.
And then I let it change. But you reminded me of a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not why ships are built. So getting out there, what are you supposed to go do, and just getting out there. And then when you're out there on the water, then God can change the wind and redirect your sails. All those quotes combining there. But he can redirect you. But if you're not moving any at all and you're sitting in the harbor, he's like, well, just waiting on you to do something, and then I could do something. So sometimes just moving forward. And also, don't be afraid to be specific with God. Oh my gosh, God can do everything. Little example there is my husband. I have such high standards for a husband. I just knew there was no way this man existed on earth. No way. Had this list of everything that I wanted, hoped to get. And I remember saying, there was a whole list, but one of those was, 2 things. One of those is I wanted the soldier without the war. I wanted a man who was honorable, who was duty, who was cared about other people, who had all these wonderful attributes, who was self-disciplined like the military men, but didn't have the wounds from the war, didn't go to war and have PTSD, didn't want all that. God gave me the soldier without the war. My husband actually is an Army brat, he is an Army brat, there we go. His father, he traveled everywhere, so he was around military men all the time, adopted those traits, but never went to war. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, Lord. And the other thing is I wanted my husband to love his family but not be attached to them, because I'd had a previous boyfriend who everything was about his family, never about mine. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I should pray for that because I want him to love his family, but I don't want him to, we don't have to go there for everything. And that's exactly it. He loves his parents, but he's not all there all the time. So being specific with God, he can do it. I promise you he can. Okay, behind Tanya.
Mine was similar. It's the RAS, and even what you said about stepping out on the water, it's like the Lord is saying to me, keep your eyes on me.
Yeah.
So because if you don't, you're going to sink, but you at least need to first take the step. And then also in the visualization that be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so our whole life is born, we're born into death, right? Until we make the decision to trust the Lord and to surrender our lives to him. So the whole process is him renewing our minds in the truth of what he's trying to build in us. And so we have to hold on and repeat those thoughts because the world is constantly repeating what we knew from birth, right? And so even the family part of it, sometimes we even have to turn away from our family and what we've been trained to believe to be true and hold on to the truth of the word. So repeating that and then having that vision, because sometimes for me as a woman, yes, I can doubt. Did I hear you correctly or was I speaking to myself? Yeah. No, he was speaking to us clearly, and even in those steps that we take, even if we misstep, he's going to redirect us to where we need to be. But laying down all of our own ambition, and even if we do have to have ambition, right? But the ambition that he's leading us into what he would have us to be and to do.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think another thing to think about as we're pursuing this journey, whatever that is, always asking yourself, but can I lay it down? If God asked me to lay it down, would I lay it down? So never being too glued to the thing or the outcome or whatever that big thing is that you're going after, always remembering that he gave it to you, and will you give it back? And will you just stop? Will you cease if he turns you in a different direction? Like always doing those heart checks all the time. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. Yes?
I was going to say, my pastor always says too, blessed are the flexible, for they shall bend.
Oh, there we go.
So
you
might
that.
start out
Blessed,
some way, but you bend and go where God would have
blessed
you.
are the flexible, for they shall bend, right? Not break. That's great. Okay, one more light bulb. Yes, ma'am, back there. We'll bring you the microphone. Yeah. Yes, Jerry.
I had a question because what moved me mostly was the title of the workshop. And it says, Your Biblical Permission to Dream Big. And I was wondering, when you have a biblical permission to dream big, and the vision is so large, like save souls, and then you have to maneuver your way into how to fulfill that vision.
Yes, so the biblical part of that was because the world tells us to dream big. Dream big, go after this stuff, become successful, build your bank account, all this stuff. But like, where in the Bible does it say that? And I very much want to do what God says I can do. And so that's where the biblical permission came from, because for me, that's like, okay, now I can breathe a sigh of relief. I can dream big because I don't want to be the useless servant. But then what was the second part is how to fulfill the big vision.
Yeah.
So something that came to mind that I heard a long time ago, not my thing, is how God is like a GPS. He's not going to give us the end goal, like the very finish line, because man, if we knew how many mountains we had to climb and like rivers we had to swim through and crocodiles we had to beat to get there, we probably wouldn't start the journey. But he's very much like your GPS, where you put in the destination, God knows the destination, but he only gives you one instruction at a time. And then when you get to that sign, he'll tell you to exit. Then when you get to that street, he'll tell you to turn. And then when you get to that roundabout, he'll tell you which one to do. So it's just doing the next thing and the next thing and not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by the entire vision, and then just trusting that God is going to give you the next step when you hit that first one. But you got to take the first one so he can keep rerouting. He can keep fixing.
It's point by point.
Yeah. All right, you guys, thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all attending.